So today, a lot of you know Lisa. She is going to be presenting on Korea and in particular, Chuseok. So we have a cooking demonstration coming up by Lisa. We're so excited to learn more. Lisa, are you ready from your end?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone. It's good to see you all. I miss attending these events in person. These are always so much fun. But it's good to see your sweet faces on the screen. So what I'm going to do today, because if you know anything about me, you know food is life for me, right? So I'm going to pretty much kind of hit the highlights of Korea, and we're going to dive right into food. Now, I know Ayumi is cooking with me. Anybody else?
Sorry.
Just the two of us. Okay. So what we are doing oh, there you go. I have the same one. So what we are doing today is, like I said, I'll give you a highlight on Korea, but then we are actually going to make a special pastry that we make at this time of year. So yesterday was Chuseok, which is basically Korean Thanksgiving. So it happens, I'll go through the details later, but it's sorry, I'll come back to it. It's middle of the 8th lunar month. Complicated. It's not our calendar, obviously, and so it falls in a different time in the season every year. But what's really great about it is, much like our Thanksgiving in many ways, it's a time of giving thanks. It's a time of spending, going and visiting your families, paying respects to your ancestors, which we don't do so openly, but you know what I mean. We still do that in our own way here in America. But it's a great celebration, and we save certain foods to only have at this time of year, and what we'll make today is one of them. So we are going to dive right in. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me, and we will get going. All right. Can everyone see the screen? Slide deck? Nope. Okay, try that again. Did you fail already? Just lost you all. Hang on.
We're here.
I was like, you were right here. Okay. Here we go. One more time. All right. You see that now? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry. I was waiting for it.
You can see it.
Great. So we're going to dive right in. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I have a tendency to talk really fast, so just slow me down. And this is not really a presentation in the way that we think of presentations. I do want you all to engage. So feel free to stay unmuted, stop me, ask me questions, especially while we're cooking, because I do hope to have some dialogue with you all while we're going through this. So first off, some fast facts about South Korea. We are only covering South Korea today, by the way. I by no means am an expert on North Korea, and so don't really want to venture there because I don't want to mislead you with bad information. But Korea, as you can see, the Korean Peninsula, as you can see, is between China and Japan. That's the part of the world it's in. The capital of South Korea is Seoul. Population right now is roughly 52 million. And in Korea, I've actually heard it described as homogenous, in that there's a really high concentration of like straight up born in, lived in, always Koreans. And so the language continues to be the dominant one. They do speak a lot of English there. I do remember that from when I lived there. A lot of that, of course, comes from when the US occupied Korea. And then the fact that there's an enormous base there, just out of Seoul, contributes to that as well. So the Western or American culture we see in things like entertainment or even food. We have traditional Korean stews that have things like cheese, American cheese, and Spam, which we all know came from America. So not complaining, because it's actually a really good stew, as bad as it sounds. But it's just really fun to see how culture, community, people, it all evolves, and we all just sort of grow together. It's a really great thing. So for my own curiosity, I did dig a little bit deeper than I normally would. I was just curious to know, because I had never known the answer to this, and that is where Koreans come from. Like, are we literally from the peninsula always? Like, we were there, it was our land, and then it was occupied, off and on by different countries all these years, and then that's who we are. As it turns out, I think it was 2017, they, through the miracle of technology and science, discovered that Koreans actually migrated to the peninsula from the area of southeast Russia and then southern Asia, far east Russia and southern Asia. So that corridor of the world, and over time we migrated down to Korea. There's a long, long, very detailed history about the three kingdoms, the different dynasties, the different occupations, but we're going to skip all of that today because we are all about food today. Let's see. So, national anthem, Egukka. It was composed in 1935, officially adopted with establishment of the government of the Republic of Korea in August 1948. Apparently, we didn't feel the need for it before that. It's really interesting. It's one of those anthems that's extremely moving. It, in very few words, speaks to the resiliency of the people. Again, we're not going to delve into the deep details of history, but the years of occupation and the turmoil and just the deep, deep sadness and loss that many Koreans, probably two generations from me, experienced firsthand, and some, of course, farther back. But when I think about Koreans, that is actually the first trait I think of, and that comes from things I learned when I was a child, the year that we spent in Korea after we moved to America, and then just in my upbringing. It's just something that's in us. It's part of our being, and it's one of the reasons why I obviously love America, love being in America, but I also have a deep love for Koreans, Korean culture, the Korean way. And the anthem, actually, if we had time, we would listen to it. It's truly one of those that really gives you great pause, because even if you can't understand what it's saying, you understand, you get the sentiment. Korea is absolutely beautiful. 4 distinct seasons. Green, hilly countrysides. We have beautiful cherry trees in the spring, or summer, spring and summer. It's not uncommon for you to, like, I'm from Seoul, so it's not uncommon for you to just step outside the city and look up into the hills, and off in the distance you'll see a pagoda or a Buddhist temple, or just lovely, lovely things. Forsythias in the spring that bloom just in the midst of brown and sometimes in snow. To see this vibrant yellow come out of the ground is just, it's joyous. It's just an absolutely lovely country. National flower. Does anyone know the middle picture, the pink blossom? Anybody know what that is? I know Amy Z, are you on this meeting? Because I think you know what this is.
I'm here, but I don't know what it is.
What?
Your screen says Rose of Sharon, but I thought it looked like a hibiscus.
Well, they're sort of kind of in the same family. So Mugunghwa is the Korean name. I actually didn't know until this last week that it's the Rose of Sharon, because I've seen the Rose of Sharon here in Missouri, and I just didn't connect the two. Mugunghwa, the name for that flower, means eternal blossom that never fades. Again, that sense of resiliency, strength, and community shows up in the name. And then that flower is actually mentioned in the national anthem. But then there's a second, growing up, we called it the second national anthem. And it's, the title of the song is Mugunghwa. And it actually talks about the flower, the characteristics, and ties it to the people. I can't even describe it. You'll have to hear it one day. Maybe the next time we do Korea, we'll have more music, and perhaps we can do it in person. And then we can have some performers come in and sing it for you. It's moving. National pastime, hiking, it says, and gaming and esports. Gaming and esports, I think we all guess. Like, that's an enormous industry that took root in Korea, and I can't even express how amazed I am that these kids can sit there and rack in an income that I can't even wrap my brain around. And they're literally gaming the whole time, full occupation. Um, Hiking is indeed a pastime. I remember vividly when I was there for a year. I was there by the time, let's see, between 9 and 10 years old. We spent a year there after we moved to America. And I distinctly remember my grandmother lived at the foot of a very large mountain. Her backyard basically was this beautiful field of flowers. And then you look just past that and the mountain trail started. And in that field, before the mountain started, was just this breathtaking scene. It was cosmos. I don't know if you know what those are, but these wildflowers growing out of the ground, just blowing in the breeze, just amazing. So hiking is a really big thing. Koreans take this very seriously. They'll hike up certain mountains almost as if it were a religion at a certain time of year with certain family members. They just love it. It's being one with nature is very important to Koreans. Seasonal activities, like I said, there are 4 distinct seasons. They do ski in the winter. And honestly, I was surprised by that because growing up, we didn't ski. Beaches in the summer, there are quite a lot of gorgeous beaches, pretty amazing. But the most popular destination is the Hawaii of, the Hawaii of Korea. It's Jeju Island, and the picture that you see at the bottom, that's one side of Jeju Island. There's another side of Jeju Island that is beautiful, clear waters, white sand beach. And Jeju happens to be a volcanic island, so you can actually go swimming, and then you can go up into the mountains, and at certain times of the year, it'll actually be snow-capped. It's pretty phenomenal. Let's see, music. Who doesn't know who BTS is at this point, right? So they are the most successful musical phenomenon from Korea since Psy. I don't know if you all remember Psy in Gangnam Style when he swept the nation. I see Allison nodding. So BTS is the new cool thing, and they are literally sweeping the world. It is phenomenal. But that's kind of cool to see Korean culture kind of up front and center through music. And then iconic food. I think when people think of Korea, they always think of kimchi and they think of stinky. Kimchi, we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but kimchi is a fermented cabbage. It is spiced with Korean chilies. I was fascinated to find that kimchi was not always spicy. In fact, chili didn't enter Korea until about 1500s, and that was by way of European conquest, and then the spice routes and people traveling throughout the world, and suddenly chilies made it to Korea, and it is like the thing, right? Because you don't eat Korean without thinking about spicy, and in all forms. But I just thought that was really interesting that it wasn't always so. Okay, the Korean flag. This is an interesting thing. So going back to what I was telling you about the whole, the sense of resiliency, the inner strength, community, taking care of each other, all of that is represented here in the flag. There's also that notion of the hiking, being one with nature, being in balance with everything around you. These are all very important things to Korea. So what you see in the flag is the white background, and that represents peace and purity. Throughout history, Korea was what I would consider non-violent, didn't choose to fight. It was often perceived as being weak, making poor decisions, losing reign, right? Because we had so many years of occupation by different countries off and on. But the more I study the history, my personal opinion, I'm not an expert, but my personal opinion is that this need to be peaceful, this need to be one, to not have all that turmoil was really important. So again, like I said, it's represented in the white of the flag, the background. The center, you probably recognize that shape. It's basically the yin and yang, but it's the Korean version of yin and yang. So yang is the red. In Chinese, I believe it's yang. It's a slightly longer A. The blue is and that's the yin. So together they form what in Korean is, I believe it's pronounced Do, which is Tao in Chinese. So lots of similarities, right, between the two cultures. But that symbol is very important. It signifies the perpetually changing opposite yet complementary forces, um, uh, or different aspects of life balancing each other, like light and darkness, good and bad, man and woman, like all of these things, and learning how to live in harmony together. The trigrams that you see on the four corners, the broken bars symbolize the yin, the dark and cold. The unbroken bars symbolize yang. So again, using the Chinese terms, bright and hot. So the trigrams are placed in such a way that they balance each other. And then together, as you see there, the components of the design are not only representative of the nation's values and ideologies, but they also symbolize the principle of movement, harmony, all of these concepts that are very important and integral to Korea. So, so I'll be a little bit more detailed. If you look at the top left, the one with the 3 unbroken bars, that represents heaven. And then if you look at the bottom right, so the opposite side, the 3 broken bars, that represents earth. And then top right represents water, and the bottom left represents fire. Does that make sense? So that continual balance and being one. So we are now going to dive right into Chuseok. So Chuseok, the Korean Thanksgiving, 15th day of the 8th lunar month. Chuseok, as you see there, a fall night or a fall day with the brightest moon. A question we get often is why, as you'll see in a little while, Songpyeon is a half moon, not a full moon. And the answer to that is they didn't like the idea that if you make it round and make it a full moon, that what happens after a full moon, it wanes, and they didn't want that. So instead, you have a half moon, so that the so that what's ahead of you is the full growth of the moon. So you're looking forward to the full moon. So therefore, Songpyeon traditionally, in most parts of Korea, were the half moon. And then the other name for Chuseok is Hangawe, and that's the center of the month. It's a very literal word. This is a very important national holiday. Like I said, people go travel long distances, long hours to get home to celebrate with their families. I'm learning that the tradition is changing now, much like in America. We don't really spend a lot of time commuting if we can possibly help it. And so, life is busy and all of that. But for the most part, people do still make that effort. So Chuseok was yesterday, but it's a 3-day holiday. They accounted for the day before to travel and the day after to travel. So it's actually a 3-day holiday, with the true holiday being the day in the middle. What you see in the photograph here is the traditional ceremonial table. So in addition to the enormous amount of food that's put on the table for the family to enjoy, this particular table that you see is intended for the ancestors. It's prepared very respectfully. Things literally are pointed in the right direction, like the fish's head has to point east, the tail has to point west. Like there are all these rules for how things need to be laid out on the table. There are even guidelines for what's on the first row that you see on the bottom versus the second versus the third and the fourth and so on. It's a very, very important detail for Koreans. And again, it's about honoring and paying tribute. So Songpyeon. So when we think of Songpyeon, this is one of the things that everyone thinks about. I vividly remember making these with my aunts and with my cousins and with my grandmother and my mother. I specifically also remember one of my cousins simply could not make them, the poor thing. So she would always get in trouble with my grandmother. It was so sad. But it's just great. I mean, these are memories that we can't replace, right? Time with family. And so we would make literally piles and piles of these, and we would eat them, some all same day, some a little later, but it's intended for everybody to enjoy. So half moon shape, like I said earlier, represents hope and growth. And depending on where you are in Korea, you might get a different kind. So for example, on the top left, you'll see the 5 colored ones. So they try to avoid using food coloring, artificial food coloring. So you will see things like This is made with strawberry, cinnamon, mugwort, gardenia seeds. Then to the top right, those resemble seashells. One thing I should point out, they are typically different based on where in Korea they come from, or what area they represent. So the seashell ones, I believe those are the ones from one of the villages or provinces towards the shore. It's just a very natural happenstance, I think. They're all made basically the same way, but the actual dough is different sometimes. Colors can be different, designs as well, and then filling. But I'm finding that my memory of the one that was most common was the one with sesame seeds, the one we'll make today. And I'm finding that no matter where you are in Korea, it's almost always present. So that was kind of cool. But so I won't labor this point, but you can see the different kinds. And I know in the recipe I shared with you all, I told you that they can be steamed with pine needles. I'm not going to do that today because we have allergies. But that is a true straight up thing. You layer the steamer basket on the bottom with pine needles, and then you put the songpyeon in when you're ready to cook it, and then you layer it again on top. And the reason you layer it on top is so that the moisture, when it drips from the top of the steamer lid, doesn't disrupt the shape or the beauty of the songpyeon. Pine needles, by the way, this is one of those Korean children's stories. I also distinctly remember that when I was about 10 or 11 years old, we had just come back from Korea. We were taking a walk in the neighborhood, and my mother found a downed pine limb. And I'm not talking twig, I'm talking a limb. My mother dragged this thing home. My brother and I were mortified. We couldn't walk far enough behind her to try and separate ourselves from her. But I know now that's what she was doing. At the time, I just wanted the earth to swallow me up. Korean mothers are well known for doing things that are, needless to say, embarrassing for their kids, but I don't know, builds thick skin, I suppose. Here are some more varieties of songpyeon. The one on top, kamcha, it's a potato, so they use potato starch powder to make those, and you'll notice the shape is a bit different. And what they're doing is they're squeezing the songpyeon and leaving the imprints on that. I don't know the history behind that, but I just know that that's specific to that area. The green ones, boiled rami leaves, rice powder dough, fillings, pretty traditional, beans, red beans, chestnuts, jujubes, sesame seeds. And then hobak. This is one of the variations I offered you all in the recipe. And we use a squash that's pretty commonly used in Korean cooking, both in savory and sweet dishes. And so that's one variety that you can make, and it naturally colors it yellow. Okay, so we are going to dive in. I'm going to show you, I'm going to stop share screen real quick, and I'm going to show you what I did. So, can you see these?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so
They're
these
beautiful.
are the traditional shaped ones, right? They look like little almonds. So this is the one that was made with the sweet, the pumpkin. This was made with green tea extract because I couldn't find mugwort. And then this, I just modeled the two together and they became swirled, as you can see. And then these, oh, and these all have sesame seeds in them. Some of them have brown sugar. I prefer brown sugar with the green tea just because of the way it tastes. And then this one, so these have no filling, but I shaped them into leaves.
Oh, wow.
These have fillings, but turned them into pumpkins. So you can do all kinds of things. You can do seashells. I've seen like almost lacy work. It's really cool. But we're going to dive in now and start making some. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Yes, 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 yes.
They're so beautiful. I love those little pumpkins and leaves. They're
It's fun. And if you, it takes a bit of work, but if you're patient, you can make just about anything. So this is, we're going to start with this. This is rice powder. So you can actually make this fresh from like actual rice. I was not feeling like a Martha Stewart, and so I bought it. So Yumi has the bag, in fact, that I bought. This is that's all it is. It's just rice powder. I at first had this compelling need to sift it. It's not a good use of time because it just works its way right in. But always try, if you're going to buy this, try to buy the one in the freezer because there's more moisture in it. If you can't find it, it's okay to buy the one that's dry. You'll just have to compensate and add more water. It just takes a little bit more time. Okay, so we're going to put this right in. And following the principles of baking, we are going to, so it needs a little salt because it's just rice, but we're going to do this before we add the liquid. And it would just need about, not so much, because otherwise it'll be pretty bland. I'm going to sift that up.
This is like a real TV show, Lisa, like a cooking class. That's so neat.
All right, here we go. So this is boiled water. It's not quite boiling, but it's hot enough. And we're going to go a little bit at a time. And I know it's probably freaking some people out that I'm not measuring, but I promise it's okay. So you want to, can you see that? You want to kind of work it until it starts to clump together.
So Lisa, I heard that if you use hot water for the rice flour versus cold water, the texture will be different. Is that true? Yeah. So that's reason that for this recipe you're using the hot water, right?
Yes, because what you're looking for, unlike most baked goods, what you're looking for is a chewy texture. The rice cake should spring back when you bite into it, and it's meant to be that chewy. And if you don't use the hot water, the rice doesn't behave properly. Okay, see how it's clumping together? It's about right. So now we're going to get really messy. I'm going to take it and put it together. It's really messy at first, but what you're looking for is as it comes together, you actually start to feel the humidity in your hands, and it actually will come away from your hands if you're doing it right. You see that? And as messy as it is, eventually, even the bowl will be pretty clean. So, the other thing I do is, I learned this when I was learning to make bread. I am right-handed, and I tend to be very forceful with my right hand when I make bread. I have no idea why. And so when I knead dough or pastry, I use my left hand instead. So if you might think about that if you're making it. Just depends on how you use your hands. But see how it's coming away? That's all it is. So that's the dough. And it's a little bit like, you know when you open Play-Doh for the first time and it's kind of humid and it's kind of sticky, but it doesn't really stick to your hands? That's what this feels like. Okay? So we're gonna pat it down. I have a wet paper towel here, and I'm gonna let it rest. And the reason for the wet paper towel is so that it doesn't dry out, because it does dry out very, very quickly. And while that's resting, we're going to, we're going to make the sesame seed filling. So I have measured, I'm only gonna make a half portion today. So this is 3 tablespoons of sesame seeds. I buy from the store for my own cooking the sesame seeds that are already partially crushed. So they're not fully crushed. Here, I'll come around and show you. They're not fully crushed, but, oh, there you are. You can see they're kind of broken up. See that? So these are roasted and partially crushed sesame seeds. It makes life a lot easier. But if you really want the work, you can buy the ones that are not roasted. You can do that on the pan. You just have to be very careful. And then you just have to grind them down. Now, I prefer mortar and pestle because you can control how finely you're grinding. Because otherwise, if you put it in a machine, you could actually pulverize it, and then you'll get like a sesame cake, and it's just an oily mess. So we're just going to take this and work it down. If you read the recipe, you'll notice that some people like to put salt at this stage. I don't like to do that because I feel like I can't control enough. Like, I like to taste it later. I also don't buy the sesame seeds with salt in them because, again, I can't control it. Much like I don't buy butter for baking the salted mix. They can't control it. So it's the same principle. So because these are partially crushed, you really don't need to do a whole lot. So it's just a little bit more ground down. And I liked it when you can actually bite into some of it. That's what that is. I'm going to empty this out. And then we are going to add a bit of honey. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of honey. I actually like honey and brown sugar better. The brown sugar gives it a different kind of sweetness, and it also has there's a textural difference to it. I prefer that, but you don't have to. You can just do 2 of the honey, and you'll be perfectly fine. So you decide. You can also decide how much you want to put in it. Some people like it sweeter, some don't. Sesame seeds can tend to have that sort of a bitter aftertaste at the back of your throat. And if you don't like that, then I truly recommend the brown sugar because it does a better job of cutting that bitter. So I'm going to put in a teaspoon. And then I'm going to put in about equal parts, maybe just about that much. You can always add more later. You're just going to work it together. You actually might need more. A little bit more. Because what you want it to do is get a little bit wet, and they're going to cling to each other. I don't know if you can see that. Starting to clump together now, and that's about what we want. Okay. So if you were here, you would see that it's just sort of sticky. You don't want it to be too sticky, but that's about what it looks like. You can see that. See? Okay, that's all we need to do with that. And we're going to pretend that this dough has been resting just a little longer. So you want to be careful that while you're working with it, that you keep it covered in between the moments that you're touching it. So you could weigh it so that you have them exactly right. But as you can see in mine, they're sort of the same. You don't have to, it's not an exact science. So I'm just going to take off a bit. And then I'm going to cover this again. And this is what this looks like. So can you see that? Do you want me to get closer? Is this okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this, because it's just wet enough, like if I were to break it, then I can put it back together. Like it doesn't suffer. So you want to roll it into a ball. Then you want to put your thumb in it so that you can poke a little hole. So you're making kind of a little cup. You want to make sure you don't go too far into the middle, because then the bottom will be so thin that when you actually fold it back together, the sesame seeds or whatever you put in it will come out the bottom, and then you'll have to start over. So just be mindful of that. You just want a little indentation. So I'm going to put, I need a different spoon. I'm going to put some sesame seeds. This is where I get into trouble. Don't feel the need to overstuff these. These are not dumplings. As a child, I overstuffed them all the time and got in trouble with my grandmother. But I still did it because I just couldn't help myself. But that's literally all you need. Just a little tiny bit. And you want to sort of nest it in the cup. Then you just fold it. And if you're going to make one like the half moon, you just sort of shape it into the ends. You just keep shaking it until it's about right. But you do want to make sure that you seal the opening, because if you don't, they'll spill out of that area too. So that's one. I don't know if you can see that. See? And it literally looks like, it's not quite a dumpling. I don't even know what you call it. That's songpyeon. That's it. So then you take this, you make a batch of it, and as you're making them, you also cover the tray with a wet cloth so that they stay nice and wet. And then when you have the whole thing, you put it into a steamer, right? And you let it steam for about, depending on how big you make them, 20, 30 minutes. I do encourage you to leave a lot of dough around your filling because, like I said earlier, the joy of eating these is that there's this sort of bite and a springiness to the songpyeon. And if you make it too thin, it loses that while it's cooking, and it almost gets hard, not hard, but not even chewy anymore. I don't even know what that description is, but it's just not right. So be gracious with it. Do you want me to show you how I made the pumpkins? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
How are we doing on time?
We're okay. Yeah, we're good. We do have 2 questions. Do you want to wait until the end, or do you want me to ask you one?
Ask me now.
Oh, okay. So Liesl asked if she says that she's guessing that this is gluten-free.
Yes.
Gluten-free.
It's gluten-free, but you have to be sure that the factory that it's processed in doesn't process gluten, because then, depending on how sensitive the person is, that could be contaminated.
Okay, thank you. And did she also ask, do the pine needles evoke a unique taste, or is it very subtle?
I think it's pretty noticeable, but that's just me. But there are some who can't have songpyeon without it, right? It's just part of the pastry. So I promise you'll notice. I do encourage, if you're going to do it, try both. Try the regular cheesecloth liner, or like I'm using paper liners. I don't know if you've seen these, but they come pre-cut in a package. So I lay this in the bottom, and I lay another one on top. I do wet mine beforehand because I find that if I don't, it sticks to the pastry, and it's kind of messy. So I always wet mine before I put it in the steamer. Okay, so the pumpkin.
I have one question,
Ask me.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Is the rice flour that you got, the frozen one, is it different from this type of rice flour?
It's different. What you're holding right now is a sweet rice flour. I actually made a pastry last night from the one in the box, the mochiko, the sweet one.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And that's really interesting because I think, who was it that talked about the fact that adding hot water changes the texture?
That's me.
That was
Sherry.
you.
Uh-huh.
So last night I had a fight with that dough because making that particular pastry, I didn't realize took so much work, but literally I couldn't keep the bowl down because it was sticking so much, and you have to beat it and process it and knead it while it's hot so that it comes out the right texture. But the one in the box doesn't work for what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, the same kind. I don't know. It's from Japan, so. But this and this are a little bit different too, because I guess they're made in different places, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what's the difference between the Songyung, is that how you pronounce it? And
Yeah, Ayumi?
and Japanese mochi.
Japanese mochi, I believe, is made out of the mochiko, the sweet,
Sweet
the
rice
box
flour.
you just held up, the sweet rice powder. Yeah, that's
It
the
depends
difference.
on what kind of mochi as well. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, not all mochi are the same.
right.
Yeah. Sorry, that's not an answer. I'm so sorry, Susan. That was a no answer.
I don't know if it's related, but Chinese have a similar rice flour dumpling type dessert that my mom used to make called maji, and it was stuffed with like sesame seed paste or whatever you wanted. That seems very similar, and it was eaten, room temperature, and it was steamed as well. And plus, it sounds like mochi.
Wouldn't surprise me that Koreans got it from you all, right? Because that's kind of where we migrated from. So, and there are lots of similarities between Chinese food and Chinese culture in many ways, right? And we see it, I see it very often represented in food. And I think it's because I pay attention to food, right? But I do notice that. Are you all, I'm sorry, I'm doing this and I'm not talking about what I'm doing. Are you watching? I'm using a butter knife, but you can also use a skewer. It's harder with a skewer because when you get to the tip, the tendency is to poke the dough, and you don't want to do that. So you could use the flat end, but it's kind of blunt. It can be done. Some of these were done with a skewer, but I prefer the butter knife with no serrated edge. So I just took the blades or the thinner end, and I started at the bottom, and I worked my way up. And the fact that this dough is so forgiving makes this really much easier than I think you can probably imagine. Because if I mess up and go the wrong way, I can actually push it back together, and then I can do it again. So that's the shaping of the pumpkin. And then I took another piece, I'll do a white piece. And this is where I feel like I'm for. I take this little tiny piece, and I go into the opening, and I kind of smush it down. And if I do it just right, it'll actually stay. And then I squish the top down. And then only because this is me, I now take the sharp end of the skewer and I stress the sides of it to make it look a little bit more realistic. So it's not just a blob on the top of the squash or the pumpkin. And then I use my nail. See? So that's the pumpkin. Do you want me to show you the leaf? That one's super easy. Okay. So the leaf is not stuffed. They turned out better not stuffed. So you roll it, always roll it out because otherwise you'll have cracks in it and then it'll separate when it's steaming. So after you've rolled it, you're going to smush it. And again, because the dough is so forgiving, you just sort of sit here and kind of play with it. And you make it turn into whatever leaf you want to turn into. If I had the time, I could probably do a maple leaf, but not today. You see how it's starting to take shape? And you just keep pressing it, pinching it, moving it around. See? And once you get it to the thickness you want, lay it on your hand. And then I make sure it's laying on a finger, not between. And I use that sharp end again. And I start at the bottom. I kind of work my way up, and I'm not pushing all the way through, but I also have to be careful I'm not too light, because if I do it too lightly, it won't hold. So then I keep going. See? And if you make a mistake, you can fix it, and then you just go straight up again, just like that. And you can make them any shape, any size. You can make them any thickness too. So I noticed that if you make them this thin, see how they're kind of not holding too well? They're good for laying on the plate, like if you're decorating a plate, you can make lots of these big ones and then kind of lay them on the bottom layer, and then you can put the big ones on top. They're really pretty. But they're not as fun to eat because there's not as much squish factor. Like there's no chew to it. It's done. That's actually all I have. The only other tip I'll give you, it's all in the recipe, but once it comes out of the steamer, so we're going to pretend this one in here cooked. Once it comes out, it's going to be very, very hot, and it's likely to be stuck on the paper or even pine needles. So you can either take it and dump it into a big bowl of really cold water, or you can be brave. You dip your hand in really cold water, and you just pick one up and put it into the cold water. It creates less of a mess, less splash. And because you dipped your hand in the water, it sort of protects your hand a little bit. So you want to just keep doing that. Drop it into the water. Let it sit for like really no more than a couple minutes. And what it'll do is, because it's so hot, it'll help to seal the outer layer, but it'll also help it retain the moisture. So once you've let it sit for a couple of minutes, this obviously is not right because this one's not cooked, but you're going to take it out, and then you're going to, what I do is I put them on a tray. So for example, if this was my tray, I would put them all in here. Don't let them touch. And then I just use a pastry brush, a really, really soft one, dip it in sesame oil, and then you just brush the pastry with it on all sides. And that'll, again, protect the pastry. It'll also give it a shine. And there's a flavor to that has to be on Songpyeon. I mean, you just don't have it without it. So that's all that is. Way easier than you thought, I hope. Yeah. So I did one more thing for you. I didn't make the full spread because Rafi's not home and Anna and I cannot possibly eat all that food. But what I did for you is lay out some of the items or bring out some of the items that you would see on a Chuseok dinner table. So naturally, you're gonna have rice. So you have your rice. This is just straight white steamed. It's also traditional to have the rice that has the red and black beans in it. Anna and I don't eat it, so I didn't make it because then it would just go to waste. But that is an option. It turns a lovely red. Smells great. I've just never liked it, so that's my problem. You have rice always. These are 3 types of kimchi. There are usually lots more. This one is a young radish. It's turned into kimchi along with the greens that grow on it. It's one of my favorites, and you eat it, bite by bite whole, or you can cut it up and eat it. This one is the traditional stuffed kimchi that everybody talks about and says smells so bad. It's kind of like going shopping for seafood. If the seafood smells bad, it's not good seafood. Kimchi is kind of the same way. If it smells funky and kind of weird and bad, it's probably because it's past its prime. So this one is stuffed with radishes, salted little teeny tiny shrimp. Sometimes they put oyster in it if you're lucky, pine nuts. But of course, as you can see from the color, it's spicy. It's got the Korean chili in it, garlic, green onion, and a few other ingredients. So what you do is they either have or quarter the head of napa when they make the kimchi. And when you take it out, you actually cut it either long or you cut it across the grain, if you will, and you have little bits of kimchi. So that's another one. And then, oh, this is the squash. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. This is the kabocha squash, the one that we use to make it yellow. So we use these in Korean stews. We fry them, batter fry them, put them in pastries. It shows up in really just about everything. And these, if you don't cut them, I feel like forever, like literally forever. But they're really good and lots of good nutrition. This is kalbichim. So kalbichim is a cut of beef short rib. I don't know if you can see it. I might actually come to that side. Kalbichim is a beef short rib. It's kind of like an American stew, but kind of not. Has lots of garlic, onion, shiitake mushrooms, potatoes. This has been sitting for a little bit while I was getting ready for the event, so it looks a little grainy, but it's a very rich broth, very traditional for this holiday. So that's a common one. Move my chair. This one is the other traditional soup. And this is, I don't know if you can see that, chicken. Ooh. So I used a Cornish hen because, again, just didn't have a need for a whole chicken. So if you can see that, it's stuffed with rice, sweet rice, whole. It has jujubes, some roots. There's even a piece of bark in here from a special tree. Very high in nutrition, very common for winter, but also for this holiday. That's that. These are 3 sides that are typical to this holiday. The colors are important, and the vegetables you use are very important. But it's for, as with all things, balance, nutrition, aesthetics, taste, but most importantly, the nutritional value of these. These are, I don't even know what they're called in English. This is a root that is dehydrated and then rehydrated and stir-fried. This is spinach, and this is fern bracken. I hope it doesn't scare you all, but it's really, really yummy. And I'm going to move back here because one of these other items is kind of heavy. Do this one first. So chun is another dish that's really common. These are fried, but all kinds of assortments of fried things. So this one is fish. This one is shrimp that's been butterflied, and there are diced carrots and green onions on that one. And then this multicolored one, this is where America comes into play. This is Spam. I bought my first can of Spam this week. I just wanted to know for you all. Green onion, imitation crab, some more green onion. There's mushroom and carrot. Carrots are blanched first before they're dipped in the batter and then fried. And they're skewered because they're individual strips of pieces of food. That's how you eat them. And then you would dip that in a soy-based dipping sauce. And then japchae is another typical dish. This is sweet potato noodles. They're kind of stringy, but again, good nutrition, good texture. And in it, you add things like eggs, spinach, mushrooms, carrots. There's also garlic in here, of course. And then there's a soy-based, semi-sweet dressing. That's beautiful color. And there is drinking on this holiday. There's this lovely thing called makgeolli. What I have just learned is that makgeolli and the other alcohol, soju, which is similar to sake in some ways, I always wondered why when I bought them for friends, they're like, that's not really that strong. It's because the real stuff doesn't get exported, apparently. Like, it doesn't clear import. So it has to be reduced. The alcohol content has to be reduced to make it to us. So they're rice-based alcohol. This one's clear, as you can see. This one's kind of milky. And what you do is you kind of mix it up, chill it, mix it up, and then you drink it this way. It's kind of like lighter fluid. It's pretty strong, even though it's not as high as it could be. And then they also have flavored soju. So they have like grape flavor, plum, peach, all kinds of flavors, lots of fruit flavors, but another variety. And then finally, I'll show you the fruit spread. So when we serve meals in general for guests or friends or family, we strive to be as generous as possible, as thoughtful as possible. It's very typical that we're buying high-end ingredients because we would serve our guests nothing less because you're that important to us. So we do the same with everything we do. But so here, with this fruit spread, we've got, see that, tangerines? You guys know the secret for shopping for good tangerines? You look at the bottom. So not the top or the stem, as you look at the bottom. And if there's a really good dimple in here, it's going to be a good one. And it should have a good weight to it too, because then it's going to have the juice in it. This is a Korean pear. They're sort of a cross between an apple and a pear. This was actually used in that beef stew. And normally what I do is, because it's kind of got the grains in it when it cooks down, I usually strain my broth before I serve it because I just don't like the grainy texture. These are persimmons. So I think you've seen the persimmons that are really tall, the Fujiyama. These are the flatter ones. These are the ones I grew up with. This one's ripe. It's kind of squishy. But they actually can be eaten when they're hard. This is one variety that you can eat before it's fully ripe, and you don't get that cotton feeling in your mouth. This is not Korean, but I found it and I was really excited. Passion fruit. I don't know if you all have had passion fruit before. Yeah, they were really good price at the market this week. Chestnuts. We eat them raw, we eat them roasted, we eat them in pastries, we eat them in just about everything. Dates. These can actually be used for songpyeon too, or other kinds of, they call them tteok, which is that rice-based kind of chewy pastry. And then jujubes. That's what I have. And then in addition, the last thing to the songpyeon for dessert, we don't do a lot of sweets in Korea, it's mostly fruits. But these cookies are also traditional. I don't know if you can see that. So these, there are like 3 or 4 varieties. Typically no bake, and there's a mold. There's a very special mold that you put the pastry batter in, and then you press it and you set it, and then you take it out, and then you keep the shape. Another tree. I think that's all I have. I'll come up to the front. Any questions? Nope.
I have too many questions, but someone else can ask.
I have one question. I have a question. When you were talking about the special tree bark, you said
Yeah.
a bark from a special tree. I was just wondering a little bit more about that. What special tree and what?
You know, I should have been better prepared. I don't know what the name of the tree is in English, but they literally, in fact, don't tell my daughter. I'll fish one out for you. You can see it. Oh. It dropped to the bottom. But it's literally, oh, here it is.
Oh.
Oh.
Literally a limb from a tree. I'll get the answer to you because I should know the answer to that. But this particular one is used in this chicken soup, this very specific chicken soup. Yeah, and it's literally what you see right there. It's literally a slice of a branch.
Where do you buy the tree bark?
So lucky for me, because I don't know what they're called, they actually come in a packet. So the soup I made comes in a packet that has all the things you need in it. So you've got this. You've got this root. See that? You've got, this is lovely, twigs of another tree. And you have, remember the jujubes I showed you? They're in the soup. So if we ever have this event in person, I will actually make the soup for you. The reason is it's really hard to describe the flavor, right? Because you're going to think that it can't possibly be good because there's like twigs and bark in it, right? Like, who would do that? I have no idea which Korean thought this would be a good idea, but this is a thing, and it's been a thing for a very long time. My grandmother used to eat this all winter. Yeah. But I will make it for you, and I will convince you that this is really good stuff.
It probably has good, like, health benefits too, maybe for the winter.
Yes. You'll find that a lot of the foods are focused on things like it helps you deal with diabetes, digestive issues. Stomach cancer is a big thing in Korea. I think it has something to do with the spice and the drinking. Like, drinking is a culture, like it is a thing, right? So you see stomach cancer a lot, throat cancer. So there's always this, it's not that they're not healthy, it's just that it's either a genetic thing or I don't actually know. But these foods are really, really rich in nutrients, and it's just part of our diet. And most Koreans eat it all their lives and never know that it's a good thing. It's just what they do.
Well, I kind of remember, like Chinese, there were a lot of soup, especially in winter. We put all kinds of like tree barks and the leaves and dried leaves,
Yeah.
all kinds of spices. Anyway, so it's kind of similar. I think a lot of culture similarities, and they're supposed to be like tonic or something.
It's a
Like
very
mud.
good word.
Indian cooking also, we do the same thing. We put a lot of,
What tree? Do you know what tree you're using?
in India,
Mhm.
we have a lot, like, most common could be like cinnamon bark and bay leaves. And then there are at least 5 or 10 different ones. And like right now with COVID and all that, we make special concoctions, which are eaten, we drink in the morning and evening for more anti-inflammatory properties and all of that. Like turmeric is one, so
Mm-hmm. But you don't have bark?
Yes, we do have a bark also. So I don't know the names, but I can share some pictures of them later.
Jerry, what kind of tree parts do they use in China?
I also really don't know the English name, but like the cinnamons, the cinnamon tree stick. I think that's a very common one we use. The other, sometimes they use like how do you call it, the licorice?
Licorice?
Licorice, yes, yeah.
Yes, they use that bark for that too. And they use some dried flowers in the soup. Yeah, I'm kind of blank in terms of the name.
There's also ginseng root. I remember
Oh,
my mom
yes.
used to put it at the bottom of like whiskey bottles.
Mhm.
It was sort of like,
This
you know,
is-
the worm in Mexican liquor, but you put the ginseng root and it's supposed to have medicinal properties, and then you can slice it into thin slices and it you know, flavor infused. And I do think that a lot of the traditional cultures assign health benefits to different things. And I think this time of year, you know, after the harvest and all, there might have been more access to trees and bark and limb than there was to, you know, things growing in the fields. So maybe that became part of the culture also. And I think now science finds, you know, that there are health benefits, but I think these cultures just have been doing it for thousands of years. And, you know, as my mom put it, you know, nobody died, so they figured it was okay.
Yeah, because, you know, during the war, during the different wars, during the occupation periods, you know, from all the different nations, there were times, I mean, I remember hearing stories about it when I was younger, right, from my grandmother, from my aunts. My mother actually was born the year the war was over, but she remembered her older siblings telling her about how hard those times were. And so they did forage because there was no food. And sometimes they didn't even have rice, right? So she distinctly remembers going into the field with her mother to look for things, because even after the war, her mother was still doing that. So they'd go into the hills, they knew exactly what to look for, like that brown side dish I showed you, the fern bracken. I've actually seen people hunt for that. I would never trust myself to do it, but these are people who know what they're looking for, and they literally will go down into the brush, onto the ground to pick up whatever it is they need to pick up. It's fascinating.
I think I found the name of that bark. I looked it up on another recipe.
What is it?
It's called Eomnamu prickly castor oil tree bark. And if the recipe you used is the same, I just looked it up online.
I've never
Let me
even
show a
heard
picture.
of it in English.
That would be interesting, because I think traditionally castor oil was seen in the US as having, you know, health benefits.
Yeah. So by the time we do this again, I'll do some research and figure it out for you all. I was just fixated on pumpkin. Can I just tell you, it was so exciting to make those little pumpkins. They actually stayed up late making them because I couldn't stop. Ridiculous.
You made a whole feast for you and Anna.
Gosh, I didn't even mean to. You were all here, you could have some.
So Lisa, I just put some pumpkin in here
Oh, look at
in the dough.
Yeah.
Does it look right, or do I put more, or is it just the color of the pumpkin that's not as yellow?
Well, so the color will depend on, so for example, your pumpkin might have been a different size than mine. So a quarter of yours might be different than a quarter of mine, right? So if you have more pumpkin, it's going to be darker. You might have to compensate with water or flour a little bit, but what you're looking for is when you touch it, your hand, it should be wet when you touch it, not wet with the like humid. And then when you let it go, it should come off your hand. That's the right consistency.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Is it working?
I think so.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Lisa, what market do you shop at for your ingredients?
That's a struggle. So I lived in Dallas before here, and we had an H Mart, and you could go to H Mart on any day and get everything you need in one stop. There's no such thing here. So I go to Global for certain products, Global Market in Kirkwood, Pan Asia out in, is it Chesterfield or Baldwin? You know that one across from Costco on Manchester? It's a huge market. It's all Asian, lots of good produce was really great there. That's where I got the passion fruit this last weekend. It was, are you sitting down? $5.99 a pound. A pound. They're usually $5 a piece. They're beautiful. So I overlooked it on those.
Nasia. I just got some passion fruit this morning from Pan Asia.
You did, see?
Yeah, and all the other ingredients too.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they usually have a lot of everything. And then on Olive at Fifi, there's a Korean store, kind of medium size. So it's on the northeast corner where there's an antique mall, there's a Korean restaurant, there's the Korean grocery, Pink Gallery,
Bakery.
Gobble Stop, like a whole bunch of other things in that shopping center.
Lisa,
Is
would you
there-
recommend any restaurants to eat at or to try Korean food?
We used to have some good ones. Right now, I haven't found a good one for about a couple years.
Okay.
They're really
Lisa's
good.
cooking?
A good chef is there, and then the chef leaves, and then it's like, why? So we've been cooking a lot at home.
So Lisa, I heard my son and so they went to the Korean barbecue place. Like the kids really love it. You can like it's almost like a buffet.
Yeah.
And there's barbecue, so it's really tasty, and they go there all the time.
They went to it's called Udon. It's there at that corner, right?
Uh-huh.
You're with him, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's an
Yeah,
all-you-can-eat- it's
My
like,
son loves udon too.
Yeah. It's like $30-something, and it's literally all the meat you can eat. I mean, what boy wouldn't be happy with that?
Yeah, all the teenagers.
But I have to say, Sherry, the day that I had the boys over to eat, I thought they would put away more protein than starch. I lost count of how much starch they ate because they ate 2 different kinds of marinated meat. They ate, there's this thing called tteokbokki. So tteok, being the rice pastry thing. So rice gets processed in Korea for sweet pastries like this, but it also, like I remember going down the corner when we lived in Korea, my grandmother would give me a bowl of rice. I'd go down the corner to the lady who makes it. She'd put it in this machine, and then it would make all this noise, and you could see it kind of traveling. And then it would come out the other end, basically looking like really thick toothpaste. Pure white, super thick, and she would cut it as it came out. Well, so that particular rice dough, if you will, gets used in lots of different ways. And one dish is tteokbokki. And tteokbokki is a seafood-based, spicy sort of, typically it's kind of drier stir fry with these rice sticks in it. But I make mine kind of soupy. And then, because boys need carbs, not only do I put the rice cakes in, I actually put in udon noodles and ramen noodles, right? And then there are bean sprouts and napa cabbage. They ate an enormous pan of that and couldn't get enough, and they went through like 10 cups of rice. I was so impressed. Like, it makes an Asian mom proud, right? When boys eat that well.
You have to remember, quite a few of them like all in the cross-country team, so they needed a carbon load.
They got it that night because between that and another noodle dish and 10 cups of rice, yeah, they had fun.
Yeah, I know Andrew talked about it after he came back home. He said, "Oh, Mom, can you make that?" I'm like, "Oh, I have to learn how to make it." Oh.
Any other questions? Ayumi, how are you doing? I don't know if she can hear. Are you good?
I'm good. I am not quite sure if mine look like the way they are supposed to.
Can I see it?
Like the one, I don't know. I feel so embarrassed. The ones that you had made looked more plump, but is that because they are steamed, or do they have to look like that when you shape them?
So when I shape them, they look like that already.
Okay, so mine's like that, but
Oh, you know why? Because you're making dumplings. So sometimes
Okay.
you have to be really careful not to flatten them. So that's why I put mine on my hand, and I just sort of crimp the edges, and then I smoosh them down again.
Okay.
So they're kind of smooth. So I lost you. There you go.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure.
You might have to start over.
Okay, I'll make new ones.
And then don't go so far in when you make the hole.
Yeah.
You really want a small indentation, put a little filling in it, and then you really don't do much with it. You just seal the top, and then you shape
Yeah.
it and press it down. And
Okay.
that stays a bit more round.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know all of you are going to try it later, right? Yeah?
Yes.
We'll Zoom again next week to see how it turned out.
We'll put a picture there.
Rocky had asked for a recipe like earlier on in the week, so I'm sure she's gonna make some.
It's funny. Lisa, have you done any traveling?
Who, me?
Mhm.
You mean this year or? Well, we went to Florida, drove to Florida to visit my brother. And that was during the 4th of July, but we stayed away from any celebrations. We just stayed at his house. You know, that was the only thing. And then I go to Innsbruck to visit my parents, which is just about an hour away. Other than that, nothing.
Lisa's really great though. She'll be traveling and she'll email or text me and say, "Hey, I'm in such and such a city. Do you know any good restaurants here?"
Oh, well, that was just the other. Yeah, I know. I wanted to go to Koreatown, but the fires last year were the same as this year.
Right.
There was a fire coming into the downtown at that point, so I couldn't take a chance.
Those are my favorite emails though.
Well, I hope to be going back, so I will be calling you again.
Yay.
My kids, went on a Korean eating tour.
Oh.
Yeah, they were both there for language training in Beijing, and they decided to make a 5-day trip to Seoul, and I don't remember where else. I was going to invite her to come to this, but she's actually in Dallas right now. Otherwise, she would have been talking about the favorite foods she tried.
Yeah, can I just say, I mean, Korea, like anywhere, right? When they make the food that's from there, anywhere you go, it's just fabulous, right? I
Yeah.
remember one of the things I loved about being in Korea was that if you wanted dumplings, you went to a dumpling house and you had dumplings. That's all they make. And they would
Yeah.
come out with those stacks and stacks of steamer baskets, right? And they set it down on your table and you just start working through it. Or if there's a particular kind of noodle dish you want, you go to the restaurant that makes only
Yeah.
that.
And, I heard there's a fire chicken place that just opened up on Page. Have you tried it yet?
Not yet, because there's the other one downtown that I still haven't tried because I keep getting mixed reviews.
That was on the TV show Food Love, I think, or something. They featured it. It looked delicious. If you guys haven't tried Korean fried chicken, you will
So
never want anything else.
You know, my grandmother used to have chickens. I remember she used to make me go out into her yard and go look for eggs in the morning. And this one hen that laid the best eggs was mean. I mean, she was mean. She was really, really mean. And these were the chicken coops that were wood on the 3 sides, so you couldn't see if she was in there. So I remember one morning I went in to get the eggs. I would cry every morning because I didn't want to do it, but I went to get them because my grandmother said so. And I went in, and I thought for sure I had seen her out in the yard. So I was like, yes. And I stuck my hand in, and she was in there.
Oh, no. That's a nightmare. You'll never forget it, will you?
Oh, but I do also, the reason I bring that up is that I remember my grandmother would have me go pick out my favorite chicken. I didn't realize she was cooking my favorite chicken.
Oh, no. Oh, no. They should have used the mean one.
I know. But no, they say that if you eat the mean one, it doesn't taste good. You get indigestion. Yeah. But my grandmother could make fried chicken like nobody's business.
Oh.
Best fried chicken I've ever had.
Well, I know that we're also going to probably, Yen, I don't know if you all know Yen, but Yen and I've volunteered to help her, and maybe she'll have you come along because her location of Nami Ramen is moving to right next to Wash U in the next month. And she's thinking of doing research on, the Korean ice cream that's kind of shaped, and they have like that fish, and then they have like the red beans and stuff in it, or custard.
Such good memories of that dessert.
She's going to be having that as an option in her restaurant.
Really?
Yes. So she wants us to go she wants to go taste it and taste test and figure out which ones to get.
Oh my God. And you have to get the right cast iron the cooking gadget.
I'll have her talk to you because, they're in the process of, it won't be right away because they're just moving, but maybe by the summer they're going to be selling that.
That is, that I can't even explain to you how good that is.
I want to try the one with the custard.
My favorite's the one with the red bean.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's something about the cast iron and the fat and the
The smell of it cooking, right?
Oh my God, the smell is so great, and then there's a crispness on the outside, that you just can't describe, and then it's just soft and unctuous on the inside. And the sweet bean is a really nice balance to the exterior, I think.
All right. Well,
It's good.
I'll tell Yen to touch base with you.
Tell her to make me 5. It's good to hear. So you haven't been to Fire Chicken, have you?
No, I was going to go the other day, but I probably will. It's not far from MICDS, so it's kind of something you could almost do at lunch, Lisa.
See, that's the problem, yeah. So Korean fried chicken typically is the, you know the technique of double frying?
Yeah.
You fry it low and then you fry it high at the end. But the magic happens, that's magic by itself. The magic happens when it comes out of the fryer the last time. And then the sauce that they put together that you toss the fried chicken in is amazing.
Is it gochujang? Is that or something like that?
Gochujang?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they have many different flavors. I looked at the menu, and they have many different options of chicken.
Yeah. There's usually a soy-based and a gochujang-based.
Can you put gochujang and mayo and just kind of like use it on burgers and stuff like that?
Well, so you can, but you have to loosen it a little bit because it's not as loose as sriracha, for example. You know, you can do sriracha mayo. Gochujang is a lot thicker, so you have to loosen it with either like a corn syrup or something. Mirin works really well too because it loosens it without making it too sweet, and it doesn't make it too tart either.
Sounds
just go
good.
really slowly. There's a really great noodle dish with that combo.
Send us a few extra recipes when you have spare time. Ha ha ha.
You know, if we weren't in this COVID detour in our life right now, I'd be cooking up a storm for you all. It's so much fun. And the colder it gets, the more I love to cook.
Well, we can all celebrate when this is over and have a big feast. That's for sure what Passport is missing because we usually have that the first session, right? But we didn't get to do that.
I'm hungry now.
Lisa, my favorite is autan, the fish egg soup.
Oh, I love that soup.
Yeah.
There used to be a chef in town. He made probably the best alcon since Korea for me. And then he left. I don't know where he went because they never tell you where they're going because I would follow the chef. Forget the restaurant, right? I'd go with the chef. I don't know where he went, but he made such a good soup. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
So, you know, it's going to sound really gross the way I describe it. I'm sorry. But it's the egg sac from a fish, right? So they take the entire egg sac. It's typically salted because that's how they preserve it, right? So back in the day when they didn't have refrigeration, but even now because you can only keep it for a while, they salt it and cure it. So they use that to make a really spicy stew that has lots of garlic and onion. It's a really light broth, and it's just spicy enough that you get warm from it, but it's not overpowering. Most people, most non-Koreans don't like it because you have to actually break open the egg sac, and when you do, the little eggs are all clumped together, and that's a textural issue for a lot of people. I like it. It's kind of like eating the little tiny sushi eggs. So I enjoy it. Where did you have it, Ayumi? Or did you make it at home?
Well, no, I don't really make it at home, but I think the first time I had it was in Korea, I think.
Oh,
yeah. And then there was a really good restaurant in Australia, in Sydney. So that was my go-to. And I'm pretty sure I've had it here once or twice, but yeah.
There's good Korean food in Australia. Really.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of great restaurants there.
And Korean food tends to be heavy on the seafood and poultry versus beef. So that's why traditionally for events like this that are really special, you do see more beef than normal. And it's partly because it's not something that's commonplace. It's also, I think, from what I understand, more expensive than seafood. I mean, imagine they're living on a peninsula, seafood is readily available. So that's the go-to. But there's just, I haven't had seafood as good as I have in Korea. I also haven't had as good citrus than I have in Korea. Jeju Island is known for their mandarins. My uncle used to go once a year before the Lunar New Year, and he would bring back, he would transport an entire crate for the family. So when the family got together, we literally all just like popped open the crate and just started going at it. And those mandarins, it's one of those things I can't really describe the flavor. It is the purest citrus flavor. It is so, so good. And in Jeju, something about the soil and the air and the sun, it is the perfect trifecta. And I've never tasted it equal. They imported some to Dallas one time to a store, one specific Asian store, and there was a line almost instantly because word got out. Really, really good.
So Lisa, I have a question. You know, once we're talking kimchi, like fresh fermented, the version has been fermented for a little bit longer, and he swear that whatever the yeast is different, or the taste is quite different, the fresh one versus the like more cured one, and like the purpose is different, the way you make the soup, you use different kind of kimchi. So it was the first time I heard there was all different kind, there was like different curation date, and the whole science into that.
There are over 100. There are over 100 different types of kimchi, a lot more. And so you're right. So there's like the traditional, straight up what Americans are used to seeing, the stuffed cabbage, right? There's that. There are lots of varieties of that. They have another variety of cucumbers that are stuffed and cured. There are at least 10 different water kimchi. The clear kimchi I showed you. There are lots of varieties of that. Depending on where you are in Korea too. So like if you're near the shore, it's not unheard of for your kimchi to also have fish, which requires a very specific salt and cure process, because if you don't do it right, it spoils. And when it spoils, you get sick. So it's a very specific recipe and that kimchi is usually produced in that area. Or you might find kimchis with oysters, or there's crab kimchi. Have you all ever heard of crab kimchi?
No.
No.
If I can ever get my hands on the right kind of crab, we are having a feast, because the word umami, right? That other flavor you can't describe. That is crab kimchi. It is. There's the soy-based version, which is not spicy, and then there's the spicy version. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. But it's another type of kimchi. There are lots of radish kimchis. The list just goes on and on. Yeah. And then, my mother used to say about kimchi, I actually liked it when it was more sour, and she would basically say it was penicillin. She didn't know of another word. But now they sell it as probiotic, right? That's the new term, but that's basically what it is. It cleanses your gut, it keeps you healthy, it's full of nutrients. It's good stuff. I love it. My grandmother also made the best kimchi jjigae. Kimchi stew.
Ooh, sounds good.
Have not met its equal.
I love bibimbap.
Oh, I love
with kimchi in it.
Yes.
The crunchy bottom.
And you know that bibimbap was an after-school snack, right?
No.
Yeah. So you know how in Korea you have banchan? Every time you have a meal, you have like 10, 15 different little side dishes, right? So in a Korean household, you have containers of those things in your fridge. So whenever you got home from school, your mother would have a soup of some kind going on the stove. She would have a fresh pot of rice. And so you get a giant bowl, take a scoop of rice, and you go to the fridge, and you pick out whatever sides you want. You dump it on the rice, and then you put the gochujang-based sauce. She fries you an egg in the meantime, and then you mix it all up, and that's your after-school snack.
Ooh, that sounds like a good idea.
A bowl at a restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we grew up on that stuff. Isn't that crazy?
I want to learn how to make that.
Oh, it's so easy, Lisa. You could do it.
My son would love that for a snack after school.
Oh my gosh.
Well, his best meal he ever had was in a Buddhist temple. It was a vegetarian Buddhist temple, and it's a very high end. They had to make a reservation. That was like their splurge, and he said that was the best meal he's ever had.
Is that in Seoul, outside Seoul?
I think so.
So do you watch Chef's Table on
No.
Netflix? So you have to watch it. I think her name is Jung Kwon. She is a nun in Korea, and they do a feature on her, and she cooks that style of cuisine, and it's amazing. Like it's just amazing. And that's just something that's very normal and natural to them. There's a deep respect for the ingredients and for the earth. And I mean, I remember temple food from when I lived in Korea, and it probably is the best food I've ever had. But it's not what we find when Korean food leaves Korea specifically. Whatever culture it lands in wants it to be stronger, spicier, saltier, or something, right? Something more. But in Korea, the true goal in cooking is to bring out the flavor of whatever ingredient you're using. So it's a very natural process. You don't over season, you don't over salt. It's a very natural thing that hits your palate. Temple cooking takes it to another level. And I think pure is the best word for that food. And it's beautiful. But you need to watch that Chef's Table episode.
I just typed it in for people to look at that.
Yeah.
So they can.
It's really good.
I will. My kids will want to tell me all about it, I'm sure.
Because if you go to Korea, you can make a reservation. I think it's a 2-day, 1 night. You get to cook, I think, with her. You definitely get to dine with them. Breakfast is something outrageous like 4 a.m. But it's a life experience from what I hear.
Yeah.
Eric Repair is the one who hosted that episode. I don't know if you know who that is. He started as a pastry chef in New York and became very famous. But he's the one who went to visit her. Pretty cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I might have to watch that tonight.
You should. It's good watching.
Lisa, do you still go to Korea?
Sorry?
Do you still go to Korea to visit?
I haven't for a while. So the last time I was there, I was 10. I try to keep up with it through friends and just through things I read. But yeah, I would love to take my kids. It'd be a great experience.
Yes. I'll join you then.
Yes, let's go.
You can give us a tour. We can do a tour to Seoul.
I don't know if you want me to, because all I will do is eat.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I also like Korean streetwear.
Oh yeah, yeah. So H Mart in Dallas. They're like this everywhere. They have the traditional Korean, like it's a grocery store, but on the when you go into the building, there are these I don't even know what you call it, like a hall that goes either way, and there are these little shops. I have my best scarves from there, cheap, but they're so cute. Like street shopping and street eating is good stuff there.
So can you shop on H Mart online from here or not?
You can, but you have to have it shipped, so then it's no longer, cost friendly.
So it's found in LA, Dallas, everywhere?
Everywhere. There are like 5 in Chicago.
Oh, so
And
when
you're
you go
like
to Chicago
Vegas,
to visit.
yeah, like Vegas had Colorado, they all have that. I know that more. Well, we're in St. Louis, it's different world.
I know.
This is one last question I have because I've been taking up everybody's time, but I wanted to ask you about Korean skincare and cosmetics because I know that they're famous for it. And, is there anywhere here you would recommend to buy it or online and products and things you like?
It's so hard because when it's imported, it's different. Kind of like the alcohol, it's different once it's imported. Once it leaves the borders, it's just different. So I have friends who travel for business to Korea, and they buy it when they're there because one, it's cheaper because they're not paying, customs fees and all of that. And they find that the quality is better. So you can have it imported, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So they own they own the skincare industry.
I saw there is a website called Soko Glam, and I have not really looked into it much, but it's all Korean skincare and stuff. And I don't know about whether or not the prices are reasonable or what have you, but probably not.
I think it really just depends on how much you want to spend.
It's an unlimited, right?
Right.
Budget.
My sister loves the snail face mask.
Yeah.
That's big, isn't it? Yeah, I know. It sounds
I
gross.
eat snail, but I don't think I want it on my face. That's the other thing. I'm assuming you know this, like everywhere else in the world, they eat snail, right? All different kinds. And in Korea, there are several varieties that I know I've had, and they are alarmingly good. Like if you can get past that squeamish moment, they're really good. And back in the day, this is so long ago now, but I remember, so where my grandmother lived, we would go around the other side of the mountain and go up the entrance and up into the mountain for our hikes. And at the foot of the mountain, they had food vendors where they had sold things like the what Yen is going to be selling.
Yeah.
And then they have snails. So it's, again, it's going to sound gross, but it's really not. In this, basically a vat of broth, they are cooking just piles of these little snails. And then they, when you come to buy it, they scoop it out and they put it into a paper cone. And I remember as a child, you know, eating them all the way up the mountain, right? Just like, it's such a fun
Energy.
And picnics in Korea, it's not sandwiches, it's not peanut butter jelly. It's my aunt used to take me up that mountain. There was this one spot on, I don't remember which side it was, but this basically there was a waterfall and then this boulder just like jut out the side of the mountain. And I don't know how she knew it was there, but she did. And she brought a picnic. Well, I know what that meant. She brought rice, a burner, stew ingredients, sides, the whole 9 yards. And so on this rock, on the side of this mountain, we had this amazing Korean meal that I'll never forget.
Wow. You can do that for us when we go with you.
Okay. Good.
We'll help carry the stuff up.
Absolutely. If you'll do the dishes, I'll cook.
Yep, I will.
Lisa, when you made the pumpkins, what did you put as a stem?
So I made 3 kinds: the white one, the pumpkin one, and the green one. And the green one, I couldn't find mugwort powder, so I used green tea powder.
So you used that as the stem, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Have you made one yet? Let's see. Look how cute. Well done. What'd you put inside?
Sesame seeds.
After you
They look cute.
After you
I
taste
haven't
it,
cooked them yet. But
so don't make
well-
all of them yet. Taste one first after you cook
Okay.
it. And if you find that it's still kind of bitter, like you'll actually feel it in the back of your throat, that little residual bitter after you're done, like after you swallow it, it kind of sits there. If you get that, when you make the next one, before you put the sesame seeds in, put a little bit like an 1/8 or 1/4 teaspoon, probably a teaspoon of brown sugar. Dark brown works better than light brown. A little bit, and you mash it down, and then you put your sesame seeds on it, and it adds a different kind of sweetness.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, it's a good balance. And the green tea tends to be kind of bitter, so you do want a little more sweet.
Okay. And you said that you add the brown sugar to it too, right?
I do. I use dark brown sugar for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I have to. This is my heritage too, so I'm enjoying it. I never grew up with it, but it's really nice to get to know these things.
And now you'll have to do it with your kids.
Yeah, I think we're going to do it this afternoon.
Yay.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions? This was so great, Lisa. I'm now obsessed with these dumplings, and I'm gonna look them up on the internet and look about those little pumpkin ones. I don't think I can make them as beautifully as you did.
Oh, I think you can.
But I'm really going to try, and I loved the display that you showed. And I'm also really into the soups you've talked about with the wood. I had no idea that wood was put in any kind of cooking, and I'm really interested in that aspect of soup making. I'm looking into that too. So I feel like I learned so much.
So when you do go, like if you go to Pan Asia, they'll have it. It's in the aisle that has like powders and soup ingredients, I think. It's towards the front of the store. But there are some packets that come with rice and some that don't. I would recommend that you get the one with rice. Because otherwise you have to buy the rice and it's just not the same without it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm really excited to try that.
Good.
I love trees, so I find that aspect of adding trees into the culinary world really just special. And I
Well,
think
and it's interesting because the flavor, you know, because you would think if you put wood, like, because it literally has that plus other twigs plus roots, right? So you would think naturally that that's got to taste kind of funky, right? Kind of hard, and I don't even know what that description would be, but it's surprisingly herbal, but not in an offensive or really strong way. There's a certain warmth about it that's really hard to describe. Once you've had it, you'll know when you smell it.
okay. I'm really excited for that. Thank
Lisa,
you.
one last thing as a tip, if anyone's going to Chicago eventually, do you have any restaurants there that you would recommend?
Oh, there's so many good ones.
I'll write it in the chat part.
Thank
We'll have to think about that one because I am very, even here, wherever I go, when I pick a restaurant, it's because there's a particular dish I want to eat because no restaurant does everything well, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I eat even up there. But I haven't been to Chicago in a few years, and I'm hearing that there are lots of good new restaurants up there in the Korean area.
We could take a tour someday.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? I would love that.
You can take the train up.
I'll join.
See it.
I'll be there.
We could do Koreatown and Chinatown.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Okay, so I'll leave you with one more recipe that's super, super simple. If you like kimchi, so the kind I showed you that's stuffed is the one that works best. So you take the kimchi out, right, of the jar, and then you slice it so they're kind of small. You don't want huge chunks. You're going to put in an obscene amount of granulated sugar because you need it to be bright and sweet. And then you mix it up, and when you get the right amount, the kimchi juices kind of get a little syrupy. So you can always add more, right? So you don't like dump a whole container in, but it's a lot. Like you're gonna feel embarrassed almost putting this much sugar in it. So you mix it up, and then you put maybe, depending on how much kimchi you have, you put maybe a teaspoon of soy sauce. I always use the light soy sauce because I don't like the extra saltiness of the regular one, but that's just me. So a little bit of soy sauce, mix it up, and then you finish it with sesame oil and sesame seeds. And in the meantime, you've got boiling in a pot the really thin Korean vermicelli noodles. Have you ever seen those? They're really, really thin.
They're like glass noodles?
No, they're wheat noodles.
Okay.
They're thinner than angel hair. You can't miss it. In an Asian store, they always have packs of them. The Japanese brand ones bundle them and put a little black ribbon around it. The Korean ones come in a bulk plastic bag. You can't miss it. It's the thinnest one you can find. So it
Do
cooks
they
in like
taste the
3
same?
minutes.
Are they the same kind of noodles?
No, in fact, I'll go get it. I'll show you. Hang on.
Okay.
So when I say I keep these on hand, I'm serious. I actually have a container that fits them perfectly. This made my
Wow,
OCD
that's
very
impressive.
happy. So these noodles are this thin. And this is actually the thicker one. You see that?
Yeah.
Like super, super thin.
Yes.
Looking like 3 minutes. So once they're done, and you want them to be slightly al dente, but they go from al dente to mushy in like no time. So you take them out and you rinse them. And this is going to be the weirdest rinsing of noodles you've ever done. You're literally like rinsing them, like rubbing them in water. You take them out and strain them. You do it again and you do it again until the water runs clear because you want the exterior starches to all come off. So you drain it. Then you put it into that kimchi thing I told you to make and you toss it. It is like the best kimchi noodles ever.
Ooh.
How much sugar do you add?
Oh, obscene amount of sugar. So
Okay.
like,
A bowl full, a rice bowl full?
like if I was using this much kimchi, woo, I think I dribbled it. If I use this much kimchi, I'm probably putting in about a cup of sugar.
Wow.
It's obscene. But that kimchi will feed now with those noodles and made this way. It'll feed probably 4 people, if not more, depending on how large a portion you want. So there's, I guess, some pass because you're not eating the whole cup of sugar. I don't know.
Well, if you divide by 4, it's a quarter cup sugar, right?
I feel like if you're serving it, you're really eating less than a quarter, so it's really okay. But that's a really
Good tip.
yummy dish.
What's that one called?
It doesn't have a name. If it does, I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I just always
We
eat it.
call it Lisa's.
There you go.
Lisa's famous kimchi noodles.
Yeah, you can. I eat a lot of it, and I don't like sweet. But there's something about when the kimchi hits that perfect fermentation state before it goes really sour and funky, but after it's not ripe, so to speak. That tanginess and the sugar and the salt of the soy and the nuttiness of the sesame oil, brilliant.
How many days does it take to get to that stage so we don't overdo it?
Oh, the kimchi?
Yeah.
Depends on at what stage you buy it. You'll have-
Oh, so you can just buy it already prepared. Okay.
yeah, but if you do buy it already sour, it goes fast. Like it'll go sour really fast, so just be
Okay.
prepared. Jerry, you look like you're working.
Writing down things. Try
He's taking notes.
right.
Either that or Jianmin has you working.
Working for my own. Well, thank you. It's so much fun just listening. Now going to start some cooking
I
now.
feel like we've been to Korea this afternoon.
Oh, you're so sweet. It's been a joy. It's good to see you all too. You know, I've missed our interactions,
Yes.
time together. Did you do it? Did you get the green ones? Ayumi? Are you there?
Sorry, not yet. I will do it later.
You've been working this whole time. I feel
Yes.
so bad.
Oh, no. I'm enjoying it.
All right.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Lisa.
It was great fun. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.
Bye-bye.